Well, the information that came out of the Newcastle hearings of the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse rocked the Hunter. There were stories of abuse, cover-up and despair, many too horrific to repeat. But last week, the government announced victims of child sexual abuse will have access to up to $150,000 in compensation as part of a national redress scheme. Well, the funds will come from churches, charities and state governments, and it'll be coordinated by the federal government. To discuss the plan, I'm joined by the Bishop of the Catholic Diocese here in Newcastle, Maitland, Bill Wright. Bishop, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Paul.
We needn't go over the past. I think you've probably said sorry long enough. Are there any observations that you'd like to make off the bat, though, about the federal government's proposed scheme?
Well, very pleased to hear of it, Paul. It came a bit out of the blue in the end from the federal government, but bishops and myself have long supported a national redress scheme, and very glad to see the government come to the party.
That upper limit of $150,000, will that be enough in all cases, do you think?
Not in all cases. Some people, of course, are very, very badly affected for over many years of their life, and they would, in justice, I think, be deserving of higher sums than that. So if there is one thing where the scheme, I think, could be improved, it is that the government make provision for exceptional circumstances. Can I say why, just quickly?
Yes, please.
It doesn't seem right. I mean, the point of this is that people should be able to receive compensation for the damage that's been done to them without the trauma and the massive legal expenses of court, right? Now, why should that not be the same for people who've been more badly damaged by it,
Yes.
If your case is particularly bad, surely access to fair compensation without court, without what are sometimes really massive legal expenses, should be your right as much as someone who was perhaps less badly affected.
Yes, in the common law, of course, the purpose of damages is the process or the principle of restoration. Clearly, people can't be put back together, though, so in many cases, no amount of money is going to be sufficient.
No, that's true. Well, in many cases, I think in all cases, it's not really a matter of money being able to make up for what's happened. However, that people receive a measure of justice and recognition. That what happened to them is shown to be wrong and vile and so on in ways that our society understands. That is that you deserve to be compensated for this. It won't make up for the hurt, but it's a measure of fairness.
Bishop Wright, is it also a watershed moment, not just for the victims, but also for the church? I mean, albeit with all of the neglect and the failure of attention to detail and all the mistakes that the church has made, and for all of the damage that's been done, do we need a moment at which this chapter can end?
Well, I don't know that it'll end. It doesn't end for victims of abuse, Paul. They go on to be survivors, but even then, with the best of people who've made the best of it, there are times when it all comes back and hits them. However, I think a moment of national recognition of what's happened and of their situations, and a bit of sort of national understanding, has got to help everybody. Yeah.
What's your understanding of how the scheme will work? If the federal government is administering it, will it simply send the invoice to, the Diocese of Maitland-Newcastle?
I'm really not across the detail, but I imagine something like that, yes.
Yeah, okay. So would you get involved in the process, do you think, as a church? Is there going to be an element of negotiation in these circumstances, do you think?
Well, as a church, through Truth, Justice and Healing, we made a major submission on the National Redress Scheme, pretty much for a federally administered scheme. I think we proposed a cap of $200,000 at the time, but very much supportive of it. Look, why it's needed, Paul, I think you know this, but at the moment, the sort of compensation people can get, if they can get any, depends on which state they live in, which institution abused them. You know, if it's a polo club that went out of existence 20 years ago, you've got nowhere to go. So it's been terribly unfair. And that's the great thing about this, that it gives a way to go to people which is not horrible, with the potential trauma of court, and you know, maybe a third of your compensation going on legal fees or something. No scheme's ever going to be perfect, or as you've rightly said, fix everything for everybody. But this is a great step forward.
And with respect, Bishop Wright, it will mean that the Catholic Church can't hide behind its status as to whether or not it's a legal entity or otherwise.
Oh, well, we haven't actually been doing that in any cases in any recent years, but no, and that's another matter that we want to see addressed as well. And, you know, working away on how to properly make that not just a goodwill thing, but a secure sort of legal fact. But that's another matter, Paul.
Okay. All right, so when do you see this national scheme coming into play? Have you had any discussions at all within the Catholic Church about when it might commence?
Well, it'll be up to the federal government to arrange for its commencement.
And they've given you no indication?
Well, look, I haven't spoken to people at Truth, Justice and Healing since the announcement, so you know, they would be the chair, or Francis Sullivan be the most likely people to have been contacted about that. I haven't heard.
Yep. Okay, can I just ask you one other thing? From a diocesan point of view, you won't be abrogating your responsibility. This won't be the start and finish of compensation. What other things in terms of providing services to victims will you continue to offer within this diocese?
Well, we have our Zimmerman Services Healing and Support Unit that regularly offers support to victims in all sorts of ways, from counselling to attending court with them to, you know, all sorts of matters. We'll continue to do that. Of course, people, I can only presume that there will be those who will still want to approach the church directly outside of the scheme. We won't walk away from that. I think the benefit of a tribunal scheme like this is that it makes things relatively easy and inexpensive for people, but there'll be others who want to take other courses, and we'll continue on to deal person by person.
Bishop Bill, just one final point, and this has been the recurring theme in the correspondence we've received from listeners this morning.
Yeah.
It's your understanding that the Church will literally pay for its sins, because our texts are saying, why should the government foot the bill? Why can't the Church accept full responsibility and pay all of the compensation to its own victims is one. Why are taxpayers picking up the bill, says Paul from Newcastle? Why not make institutions sell everything first? So your understanding of the way the scheme is, or the scheme will work, is for those where the liability of this diocese is acknowledged, or the Catholic Church generally, the compensation will be met by that institution.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yep. Okay.
And in the proposal that we put forward, and I haven't seen the details of this in the federal scheme, but in the proposal that we put forward, the Commonwealth became sort of the payer of last resort, where institutions no longer existed and that sort of thing. But the things like the churches that are still around, the tribunal will award the damages, and the institutions will pay it.
All right, Bishop Bill, we appreciate you joining us on the program today.
Thank you, Paul. Good on you.
There's Bishop Bill Wright, the Bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Maitland-Newcastle. If you've got any observations about that, you're welcome to share them with us. 0487 799 1233 or 1300 33 1233 is the number to call on if you'd prefer to do that. I just want to clarify that final point, because the advice that we've received from the federal government is the Commission proposes the redress would be funded by the institutions where the abuse occurred, or by governments if the abuse happened in a state-run facility, or where a non-government institution no longer exists. So that is the position in regard to who foots the bill, despite the federal government administering that national scheme.